All right, today I'd like to talk about the shapes of stories. I have three. Again, I'm doing this with the whiteboard to kind of illustrate these visual things that help me out a little bit. But anyway, the way I think about shapes, and we had this in the lecture, is I think about the line, the square, and the circle. I don't know, maybe it's a gimmick. The line, the square, and the circle. The line for me represents the linear movement of the story. Every story begins someplace. We know this, we've heard this, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? It's a linear movement for the story. We're really caught in this with writing because writing is finally a linear activity. We start with the first word and we move straight forward until we get to the last word. The reason we want to think about this linear movement is that two things are happening. One is the story is beginning here and it's concluding, but it's also deepening in its meaning. I had you look at the Vonnegut video. It's either coming up or we have seen it already, and Vonnegut talks about characters kind of going like this. But however you want to think about the movement of it, information is always accruing in any story, in any book, no matter what it is. We learn something, and our depth of knowledge increases as we move along. And generally in a story, the story will rise, they call it the rising action, to some climax where everything comes to a head. And then there might be a dropping off, but there might not be. It could end here, but there could also be a dropping off that's known as a denouement, a wrapping up of the story. That's the line. The square is a shape for me that represents blocks of information. The first block of information we deal with, of course, is a sentence. We know already that every sentence represents a single idea. But also we have paragraphs that represent a single idea. Or we have sections, or we have chapters. Sometimes we have different voices that represent different ideas. And so I want us to keep in mind that we're going to chunk information as we're writing our story. Because a single sentence about one thing and then a sentence about something completely different, it's very hard for the reader to organize that. The reader reads quickly, and they need to get these larger sections of information at a time. The circle is the last shape that I want to emphasize. It suggests, for me, the story's unity. We often find that with a story represents a problem in the beginning, and I can talk about this in various ways, whether it's an idea book or whether it's a narrative. There's a problem that's suggested in the beginning, something that's unsettled, a tension. That tension that's suggested in the beginning finally becomes resolved at the end. And everything that happens in this story is a movement towards that resolution. Another way to think of the circle, too, is only things that are involved in the very heart, the principle of the story. Those are the only things we're going to be including in the story. We're not going to include tangential information that's not important for the development of the story. If it's tangential, you leave it out. One way a storyteller engages their audience is by focusing every detail, everything that they select, their attention on the things that make the story complete.